In the vast, unforgiving heart of the Montana Territory, a good man's hope arrived on the 3:10 train. Jacob Miller, a rancher carved from the very dust and grit of the land, had ordered himself a bride. He paid for a partner, a companion advertised as pious, gentle, and of a sweet disposition. He dreamed of a woman to share his hard-won prosperity, to fill his silent home with warmth. And when Rosalie Evans stepped onto the platform with her shy eyes and modest grey dress, it seemed his prayers had been answered. But prayers in the West have a funny way of turning into curses. The woman he was about to marry wasn't just running to a new life. She was running from a past so drenched in blood and betrayal it could drown them both. The sun beat down on the town of Redemption Creek with the oppressive weight of a blacksmith's hammer. Dust fine as powdered bone coated everything, the raw lumber of the general store, the weary horses tied to the hitching posts, and the sweat-stained brim of Jacob Miller's hat. He stood on the railway platform, a solitary figure of immense patience, his hands clasped behind his back. He was not a handsome man in the way of dandies from the East, but his face held a different kind of appeal. It was a map of hard work, with lines etched around his eyes by the relentless sun, and a jaw set with the determination of a man who had wrestled a living from the stubborn earth. His ranch, the Triple M, was a testament to that determination. 10 years he'd poured his soul into that land, turning a parched expanse of sagebrush into a thriving cattle operation. He had a solid house, a full barn, and the respect of every man in the territory. But at night, when the coyotes sang their lonesome chorus, the silence inside his home was a physical presence, a hollow ache in his chest. At 35, Jacob Miller was a success in every way but one. He was profoundly alone. So he had done what many men on the frontier did. He'd swallowed his pride and written a letter to a matrimonial agency in Boston. He enclosed a photograph of himself looking stiff and uncomfortable in his Sunday best, and a bank draft for a considerable sum. He listed his requirements plainly: a woman of good character, not afraid of hard work, who sought a stable life and a family. He didn't ask for a portrait in return. He believed in the goodness of people, a faith that was becoming increasingly rare in these parts. He put his trust in the agency's proprietor, a Mrs. Genevieve Bell, and in the name she had provided, Miss Rosalie Evans. The distant wail of the train whistle sent a jolt through him, a strange mix of terror and elation. He wiped his palms on his trousers, the rough denim, a familiar comfort. What if she took one look at his weathered face and the dusty primitive town and decided to stay on the train? What if she was nothing like her letter, which spoke of church socials, a love for baking and a quiet desire for a peaceful home? The locomotive chugged into view, a great black beast breathing steam and smoke, and ground to a halt with a deafening screech of metal. A few drummers and a family with too many children disembarked. And then she appeared in the doorway of the passenger car. She was smaller than he'd imagined, and the dusty grey of her travelling dress seemed to swallow her. A modest bonnet shadowed her face, but as she descended the steps, clutching a single worn carpet bag, she looked up. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. The letters had not done her justice. She had a face like a porcelain doll, pale skin, wide, doe-like eyes, the colour of a stormy sky, and a mouth that seemed made for either a shy smile or a gasp of surprise. She looked fragile, lost, and utterly out of place. She was everything he had hoped for. He stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Evans, Rosalie Evans." Her eyes darted to him, and for a split second he saw something other than shyness there. It was a flicker of appraisal, sharp and calculating, the way a man sizes up a poker hand. Then it was gone, replaced by a soft, almost tremulous vulnerability. "Mr. Miller?" she asked, her voice a gentle melody. "Jacob, please," he said, his own voice sounding rougher than usual. He reached for her bag. "Welcome to Redemption Creek." "Thank you, Jacob," she murmured, her gaze sweeping over the town. She took in the saloon with its batwing doors, the hardened faces of the men loitering outside the land office, the ever-present dust. A faint, unreadable expression crossed her features before she smoothed it away and offered him a small, perfect smile. "It's rustic." Jacob felt a blush creep up his neck. "It ain't Boston, that's for sure, but it's good land, honest land. My wagon's over here." As he led her away from the station, he didn't notice the way her shoulders, which had been tensed like a cornered animal's, relaxed just a fraction. He didn't see the way her eyes lingered on the sheriff's office, or how her hand, when she thought he wasn't looking, strayed to a small, barely visible lump under the fabric of her dress near her waist. He was too lost in the simple, profound relief that she was real. She was beautiful. And she was here. He helped her onto the wagon seat, her touch as light as a feather, and for the first time in a decade, Jacob Miller allowed himself to believe that his loneliness was finally at an end. He had ordered a sweet, gentle bride from back east, and as far as he could see, that was exactly who had arrived. The Miller Ranch was nestled in a shallow valley, protected from the worst of the prairie winds by a ridge of low pine-studded hills. A creek, the lifeblood of the property, snaked through the cottonwoods, its water clear and cold. To Rosalie, whose life had been a series of grimy city boarding houses and smoky clandestine back rooms, the place was like another world. The sheer scale of the sky, the clean, sharp scent of pine and sage, the profound quiet, it was both intoxicating and unnerving. Jacob, for his part, watched her with the nervous intensity of a boy on his first courtship. He showed her the house he had built with his own 2 hands, the sturdy furniture he had crafted, the vegetable garden he struggled to maintain. He half expected her to be disappointed by its simplicity, by the lack of curtains or fine china. Instead, she ran a hand over the planed wood of the kitchen table and said, "It's strong. It's a real home." The sincerity in her voice was a balm to his anxious soul. In the weeks that followed, Rosalie Evans proved to be everything her letters promised, and more. She rose before the sun, her quiet movements, a new and welcome sound in the house. She learned to cook on the wood-fired stove, turning out biscuits that were light and fluffy, and stews that warmed a man to his bones. She had a knack for gardening, coaxing life from the stubborn soil. She transformed the stark, masculine house into a home stitching curtains from spare flour sacks and placing jars of wildflowers on the windowsills. Jacob found himself falling for her hard and fast. He loved the way she'd listen, truly listen, as he talked about his cattle and his plans for the ranch. He loved the rare, genuine laugh that would escape her when one of his ranch hands, a grizzled old cowboy named Pete, told a tall tale. He loved the quiet evenings, sitting on the porch, watching the sun bleed across the horizon, the comfortable silence between them, a testament to a burgeoning companionship. But beneath the surface of this domestic bliss, there were whispers of another Rosalie. Jacob, blinded by his growing affection, barely noticed them. He saw her competence with a needle and thread, but missed the unnerving precision with which she could gut a fish or pluck a chicken, her movements economical and devoid of any squeamishness. He complimented her steady hand when she helped him stitch a gash on his arm from a barbed wire fence, not questioning how she knew the exact way to pull the thread tight to leave the cleanest scar. One afternoon, a young mare, spooked by a rattlesnake, threw one of the younger hands and bolted toward the rocky foothills. While the men scrambled for their horses, Rosalie, who had been hanging laundry, simply walked to Jacob's own stallion, a half-wild beast named Diablo, that only he could ride. With a grace that defied her delicate appearance, she swung herself onto its bare back, kicked her heels into its flanks, and took off like a shot. She rode not like a lady from Boston, but like a Comanche, low and fast, guiding the powerful animal with an instinctual command of her body. She cornered the spooked mare in a box canyon and led it back, her hair having come loose from its pins, her face flushed and alive. The ranch hand stared in awe. Jacob was simply dumbfounded. "Where in God's name did you learn to ride like that?" he asked, his voice filled with a wonder that bordered on suspicion. Rosalie froze for a moment, the wild, vibrant look on her face vanishing as if behind a mask. She slid off the horse, suddenly the demure Miss Evans again. "My father, he kept horses," she stammered, smoothing down her dress. "A long time ago. I suppose some things you don't forget." The explanation was plausible enough, and he wanted to believe it. He chose to see it as yet another of her surprising strengths, another reason to admire her. They were married by a traveling preacher a month after her arrival. The ceremony was simple, held in the front room of the ranch house, with Pete and the other hand, a young man named Billy, as witnesses. When Jacob slid the simple gold band onto her finger, her hand trembled. He thought it was nerves. He couldn't know it was the tremor of a woman sealing the door on a past she prayed would never find her. That night, as his wife, she was shy but not unwilling. In the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Jacob held her and felt a sense of completion that was overwhelming. He had a home, a wife, a future. Rosalie lay awake long after his breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the moonlight painting silver stripes across the room. She was Mrs. Rosalie Miller now. The name felt foreign on her tongue. The life felt like a costume she was wearing, one that was growing more comfortable with each passing day. She was beginning to love the quiet strength of the man beside her, his inherent goodness, a stark contrast to the men she had known before. For the first time in her life she felt safe. But safety was a luxury she had never been afforded. And as she finally drifted off, her dreams were not of her new life on the Montana plains. They were of gaslight and cigar smoke, the click of a revolver's hammer, and the face of a man with eyes as cold and grey as her own, a man she had betrayed, a man who never ever forgave a debt. The illusion of paradise held for 2 blissful months. Rosalie settled into her role as the rancher's wife, her days falling into a rhythm of chores and quiet companionship. She grew to cherish the predictability, the way the sun rose over the eastern ridge and set behind the western one, the simple goodness of a home-cooked meal, the tired but content look on Jacob's face at the end of a long day. The memories of her former life began to feel distant, like a story someone else had lived. The name Lily Kane was a ghost she was slowly, methodically burying. The first crack appeared on a supply run into Redemption Creek. Jacob was negotiating with the freight agent about a shipment of salt licks, leaving Rosalie to purchase flour and other necessities at Gable's general store. Mrs. Gable, a woman whose nose for gossip was sharper than any of the knives she sold, was holding court as usual. "And the sheriff says they were professionals," she was saying to a pair of local wives. "Hit the bank in Helena clean as a whistle. Shot a Pinkerton man dead on the street, they say." Rosalie kept her head down, feigning intense interest in a bolt of calico fabric. Talk of robberies was common, but this one made the hairs on her arms stand up. "It's that Corbin Shaw's gang, I'll wager," one of the women said. "They say he's the devil himself, charming as a preacher and twice as deadly." At the mention of the name, Rosalie's blood ran cold. Her hand, reaching for a sack of beans, faltered. Corbin Shaw, a name from her nightmares, a name she had prayed she would never hear again. They say he had a woman with him. Mrs. Gable added her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Crimson Canary, they called her, because she'd sing in the saloons to scout the place, pretty as a songbird, right before the whole gang came down on it like wolves. They say she was colder than any of the men. Rosalie felt a wave of dizziness. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. She had to get out. Forcing a polite smile, she paid for her goods and hurried out of the store, nearly colliding with a man who was leaning against the porch post. He was a stranger, thin and wiry, with a sallow face and nervous, darting eyes that missed nothing. He wore a dusty bowler hat and a cheap suit, and he looked utterly out of place. His eyes met hers, and there was a flicker of something, not recognition, but predatory interest. It was a look she knew all too well. It was the look of a hunter. She quickly loaded her supplies into the wagon, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jacob joined her moments later, oblivious to her distress. "Everything all right, Rosie?" he asked, noticing her pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just a headache." She lied, forcing a weak smile. "The sun is very strong today." But the encounter had shattered her peace. The stranger stayed in town. He took a room at the boarding house and spent his days in the saloon drinking cheap whiskey and listening. Rosalie saw him everywhere. When she rode to the edge of the property to check on a watering hole, she would catch a glimpse of him on a far-off ridge, a tiny figure watching the ranch. When she was in town, she could feel his eyes on her back. He wasn't one of Corbin's inner circle, but she recognized his type. He was a bottom feeder, a scavenger who hung around the edges of dangerous outfits, hoping for scraps. He was looking for someone. He was looking for her. For a week she lived in a state of high alert. The skills she had suppressed came roaring back to the surface. She found herself assessing every shadow, every sound. She started sleeping with one of Jacob's old skinning knives under her pillow. The transformation was subtle, but Jacob wasn't a fool. He noticed her sleepless nights, the new tension in her shoulders, the way she would startle at the sound of an approaching horse. "Rosalie, what is it?" he finally asked one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "Something is spooking you. You can tell me." She looked at his honest, open face, and the lie caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him everything to unburden her soul. But how could she? How could this good, simple man ever understand the life she had led? He would look at her with disgust, with horror. He would cast her out. The thought was more terrifying than any bounty hunter. "Before I came here," she began choosing her words with care, "I was involved with a man. Not by choice. He was a bad man, a gambler. He was cruel. I ran away from him to start a new life. Sometimes I worry he might try to find me." It was a fraction of the truth, a heavily sanitized version that painted her as a victim, which, in some ways, she was. But it omitted the crucial damning facts of her own complicity. Jacob's expression hardened, but not at her. It was a protective anger. What was his name, if he ever shows his face here? "No," she said too quickly. "He won't, I'm sure of it. It's just, seeing new faces in town makes me nervous. That's all." He accepted her story, his desire to protect her, overriding any suspicion. He held her close, promising that no one would ever hurt her again. Rosalie knew she had to deal with the stranger herself. Waiting for him to make a move was not an option. A few nights later, when Jacob was out with Pete tracking a mountain lion that had been preying on calves, she saw her chance. A full moon illuminated the ranch, casting long, stark shadows. She put on a dark dress, took the skinning knife, and slipped out of the house. She didn't need a horse. She moved through the darkness like a phantom, using the terrain for cover, her footsteps silent on the dry earth. She found him where she knew he'd be camped in a small ravine, a mile from the house, a low fire casting a flickering glow on his sallow face. He heard the snap of a twig, a mistake she made deliberately, and was on his feet in an instant, a pistol in his hand. "Who's there?" he snarled. Rosalie stepped into the firelight, the knife held loosely at her side. "You've been watching me, Mr. Finn," she said, her voice low and steady. She had heard his name in the saloon. The man, Finn, squinted, his gun still raised. "I don't know you, lady." "I think you do," she said, taking another step closer. "Or rather, you know of me. You're looking for the Crimson Canary. You're sniffing around, hoping Corbin Shaw will throw you a bone for finding his lost bird." Recognition, then fear, dawned on Finn's face. He had heard the stories. He knew who he was dealing with. I don't know what you're talking about." "Stop lying," she snapped, and the gentle, soft-spoken Rosalie Miller was gone. In her place stood Lily Kane, her eyes like chips of ice, her voice carrying an authority that was absolute. "You will ride out of this valley tonight. You will forget you ever saw me. You will tell anyone who asks that the trail went cold in Denver. If I ever see your face again, this knife will open you up from gullet to groin. Do you understand me?" Finn, who had faced down armed men in bar brawls, found himself utterly terrified. The woman in front of him was more frightening than any of them. He nodded dumbly, his gun hand trembling. "Go," she commanded. He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled to saddle his horse, not even bothering to douse his fire, and galloped away into the night. Rosalie stood for a long time watching him go, the adrenaline slowly seeping out of her. The knife felt heavy and cold in her hand. She had done it. She had protected her new life. But the act of doing so had resurrected the very person she was trying to kill. Lily Kane was not buried. She had just been sleeping. And now she was awake. For a month after Finn's departure, a fragile peace returned to the Triple M. Rosalie threw herself into her life with a renewed fervor, as if by sheer force of will she could erase the night in the ravine. But a seed of unease had been planted. Jacob, though he never spoke of it, had found the smouldering remains of Finn's campfire the next morning. He knew she had lied about the stranger simply being in town. He had been camped on their land, watching them. He didn't confront her, but a new watchfulness entered his eyes. The trust between them, once so pure and simple, was now tinged with the shadow of a secret. The real storm arrived not as a thunderclap, but as a cool breeze. A man rode into Redemption Creek, not on a dusty trail horse, but on a magnificent black thoroughbred with a custom-tooled saddle. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, his boots polished to a high sheen. He was handsome with silver, streaking his dark hair at the temples, and eyes the color of a winter sky, charming, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. He checked into the town's only hotel, introduced himself as Mr. Cole, a businessman from San Francisco, looking into mineral rights, and proceeded to charm the town. He bought drinks for the men in the saloon, complimented Mrs. Gable on her store, and even made a generous donation to the church building fund. He spoke with an educated, easy grace that had the townsfolk, including Sheriff Brody, eating out of his hand. Rosalie heard about the newcomer from Jacob and felt a familiar dread coil in her stomach. She avoided town for a week, using the excuse of the fall canning to stay at the ranch. But she knew it was only a matter of time. Her reckoning came on a Sunday. Jacob insisted they attend the preacher's service. As she stood outside the half-finished church, making small talk with the other ranchers' wives, she saw him. He was leaning against the land office across the street, watching her. It was Corbin Shaw. He looked different from the man in her memories, more polished, more dangerous, but it was him. The years had only sharpened his predatory elegance. He gave her a slow, deliberate smile, a smile that promised ruin, and tipped his hat. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. She felt the blood drain from her face. "Rosalie, are you well?" Jacob asked, placing a concerned hand on her arm. She forced a nod, her throat too tight to speak. She endured the church service in a fog of terror, every prayer a plea for deliverance. She could feel his presence across the street, a palpable weight pressing down on her. Corbin didn't rush. He was a patient predator. For days he laid his siege. He made a point of introducing himself to Jacob in the saloon, discussing cattle prices and politics with an easy expertise. He bought Jacob a drink, clapping him on the back like an old friend. Jacob came home that night impressed. "Met that Mr. Cole from San Francisco," he told Rosalie. "Sharp as a tack, seems to know a bit about everything." Rosalie felt a fresh wave of nausea. This was Corbin's way. He never just destroyed his enemies. He dismantled their lives first, piece by piece, savoring every moment. He was showing her that he could touch her life, that he could infiltrate her world, that nothing she had built was safe from him. The direct confrontation came when she was alone. Jacob and his men were out on a 2-day roundup in the high pastures. Rosalie was in the chicken coop gathering eggs when a shadow fell over the doorway. She looked up, and he was there, blocking the only exit. "Hello, Lily," Corbin Shaw said, his voice a smooth, venomous purr. She straightened up slowly, the wire basket of eggs clutched in her hand. "My name is Rosalie." He chuckled a low, humorless sound. "You can change your name, you can change your dress, you can even play house with some dirt-kicking sodbuster, but you can't change what you are. And you and I, we're the same." He stepped into the coupe, the scent of expensive cologne and danger filling the small space. "What do you want, Corbin?" she asked, her voice tight. "What do I want?" He took another step, closing the distance between them. "I want what's mine. I want the $30,000 you stole from the Union Pacific payroll, our payroll. And then, I want you. The money is gone." She lied, her heart pounding. "Don't lie to me, Lily," he whispered, his eyes boring into hers. "You were always the smart one. You wouldn't have run without a nest egg. I've been looking for you for 2 years. You were clever, I'll grant you that. A mail-order bride in the middle of nowhere genius. I almost respected it. Leave. Leave this place and never come back," she said, desperation creeping into her tone. His expression hardened. "I don't think so. I've seen your new life. This rustic fantasy. This big, simple man who looks at you like you're an angel sent from heaven. Does he know? Does he know about the bank in Cheyenne? Does he know about the Pinkerton in Helena? Does he know what your hands are capable of?" He reached out and gently touched her cheek. She flinched as if struck. "I have a proposition for you," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "Give me the money, all of it, and come back with me. We were good together. We can be again. We'll go to South America, live like royalty." "No," she said the word, barely a whisper. His eyes turned to ice. "No, that's a shame. Because the alternative is so much messier. If you're not with me, you're against me. And I will burn this entire valley to the ground to get what I'm owed. I'll start with him. I'll tell your farmer husband what you are, and when he looks at you with disgust, when his love turns to ash in his mouth, I'll kill him. Slowly. Right here on the land he loves so much." Tears welled in Rosalie's eyes, tears of rage and terror. She knew he wasn't bluffing. She had seen him do worse, for far less. "You have until he gets back," Corbin said, stepping back towards the door. 2 days. The money. And you. Or he dies." He turned and walked away, his polished boots silent in the dust. Rosalie sank to the ground, the basket of eggs falling from her hand and smashing on the dirt floor. She was trapped. Her past had not just found her. It had come to devour her future whole. The next 48 hours were a private hell for Rosalie. The idyllic ranch became a cage, every familiar object a reminder of the life she was about to lose. She moved through her chores like an automaton, her mind racing, searching for an escape where none existed. She could run, but Corbin would hunt her down. More importantly, he would make good on his threat to Jacob. The thought of Jacob paying the price for her sins was unbearable. She couldn't give in to Corbin to return to that life of blood and fear. And she couldn't let him harm Jacob. It left only one option, the most terrifying of all the truth. Jacob and his men were due back at dusk on the second day. Rosalie spent the afternoon preparing for his return, not with the usual warmth, but with the grim finality of a condemned prisoner setting their affairs in order. She cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken, potatoes, and gravy, her hands moving with a mechanical precision. The house was spotless, a perfect picture of the life she had so briefly inhabited. She saw the dust cloud from their approach on the horizon, and her stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. She stood on the porch, smoothing down her apron, her face a pale, emotionless mask. Jacob swung down from Diablo, his face tired, but lit with a genuine smile when he saw her. "Rosie," he said, striding towards her. "Smells like you're celebrating. Did we miss a holiday?" His smile faltered as he got closer and saw the look in her eyes. "What is it? What's wrong?" "We need to talk," she said, her voice hollow. "Inside. After you've washed up." The meal was a silent, torturous affair. Jacob tried to make small talk about the roundup, but her monosyllabic answers quickly killed the conversation. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. After he had finished, he pushed his plate away and looked at her, his expression a mixture of concern and impatience. "All right, Rosalie. Out with it. You've been like a ghost for 2 days. This is about that fella Cole, isn't it? I saw him ride out this way yesterday." Rosalie took a deep, shuddering breath. "His name is not Cole. It's Corbin Shaw, and he is the man I told you about. The man from my past." Jacob's jaw tightened. "I knew it. He's threatening you. Well, he's picked the wrong man's wife to threaten. I'll go see Sheriff Brody in the morning. We'll run him out of the territory." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't understand. It's not that simple." She stood up and walked to the fireplace, her back to him. She couldn't bear to see his face as she spoke the words that would destroy everything. "The story I told you, it wasn't the whole truth. I didn't just run away from him. I was with him. We were partners." Jacob was silent. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. "Partners in what?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "In his business," she whispered. "He's not a mineral speculator. He's a thief, a bank robber, a killer." She could feel his stare on her back, feel the weight of his disbelief. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "Rosalie, what are you saying?" She finally turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks, her carefully constructed composure shattered. "I'm saying I was one of them. I was part of his gang. My name isn't Rosalie Evans, it's Lily Kane." The name felt like poison on her tongue. "They called me the Crimson Canary. I would scout the banks, the payroll offices. I would find their weaknesses, and then Corbin and his men would..." She couldn't finish. The shame was too great. Jacob stared at her, as if she were a complete stranger. The loving wife he had known for months had vanished, replaced by this weeping, broken woman confessing to monstrous things. He shook his head, a look of profound confusion on his face. No, the woman I married, she's gentle, she's kind. She couldn't. But I did, she cried, her voice raw with anguish. I did those things. I lived that life for 5 years. It was all I knew. I wanted to get out, but Corbin, he owns everyone around him. I saw a chance 2 years ago. There was a big score, a Union Pacific train. I took my share, and a little extra, and I ran. I changed my name. I tried to disappear. I thought, if I could just get far enough away, I could become someone else. I saw your letter in Mrs. Bell's agency, and I thought this was my chance, a chance to be good. She took a step towards him, her hands outstretched. Jacob, I swear to you, the woman you've known these past months, that is who I want to be. I love this life. I've come to love you. Jacob recoiled as if she had tried to strike him. The confession of love, which he had longed to hear, was now tainted by the poison of her lies. His face, which had been confused, now hardened into a mask of cold, deep-seated hurt. It wasn't just anger. It was the shattering of a dream. Love me, he said, his voice dripping with a bitterness she had never heard from him. You lied to me from the moment you stepped off that train. Every meal you cooked, every smile, every touch, it was all a lie. You didn't marry me. You used me. You used my home as a hideout. No, it wasn't like that. Don't, he roared, his voice cracking with the force of his emotion. Don't say another word. My God, I've been a fool. The biggest fool in Montana. Pious and gentle, he quoted her advertisement with a sneer. What a joke. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair, his world completely upended. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw real hatred in his eyes. He wants money, she said, her voice barely a whisper. $30,000. He says if I don't give it to him and go back with him, he's going to kill you. Jacob let out a harsh, joyless laugh. So that's it. You're only telling me now because your murdering friend is threatening my life. It was never about the truth. It was about saving your own skin. That's not true. Get out, he said, his voice flat and dead. What, to get your things? I want you gone by sunrise. I don't care where you go. I don't care what happens to you. Just get out of my house. Get off my land. He turned his back on her, walking to the window and staring out into the darkness, his shoulders rigid. The dismissal was absolute. The man she had fallen in love with, the life she had come to cherish, was gone. The betrayal in his eyes was a wound far deeper than any Corbin Shaw could inflict. She was Lily Kane again, and she was utterly, completely alone. The hours before dawn were the longest of Rosalie's life. She packed her few belongings back into the worn carpet bag she had arrived, with her movements slow and deliberate. Every object in the small bedroom was a fresh torment. The quilt she had mended, the rocking chair where Jacob would sit and read the paper, the empty space beside her in the bed. She had found a home, only to have it ripped away by her own past. Jacob's words echoed in her mind. Get out. She didn't try to reason with him further. She had seen the finality in his eyes. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too absolute. He saw her now not as Rosalie, his wife, but as Lily Kane, the outlaw, a viper he had unknowingly welcomed into his home. She penned a short, simple note, her hand shaking. I am sorry for the lies. I will lead him away from here. You will be safe. She left the note on the kitchen table, along with the simple gold wedding band he had placed on her finger. Taking it off felt like tearing a piece of her own skin. Her plan was desperate and likely fatal. She had hidden the money, the $30,000, in a waterproof oilskin pouch buried deep inside a grain silo in the barn. She would retrieve it, ride out to meet Corbin at the appointed place, a desolate rock formation north of the valley they used to call the Devil's Anvil. She would give him the money and try to bargain for her freedom. She knew it was a fool's hope. Corbin wouldn't let the only witness to so many of his crimes simply walk away. But if her death bought Jacob's safety, it was a price she was willing to pay. Meanwhile, Jacob sat in the dark front room, a bottle of whiskey and a glass on the table before him untouched. He was a man hollowed out. The warmth and hope that Rosalie had brought into his life had been replaced by a cold, gnawing emptiness. He replayed every moment of the past few months in his mind, searching for the signs he had missed, cursing his own blindness. He had loved a ghost, a fabrication. Just before the first hint of grey light touched the sky, he heard the faint creak of the barn door. He assumed it was her leaving, as he had commanded. A bitter satisfaction, warred with a profound sense of loss. He was about to pour a drink when he heard another sound, the low murmur of voices from the direction of the road. It wasn't Rosalie. Curiosity and a lingering sense of unease propelled him to the window. 2 riders were sitting on their horses, just beyond his fence line, partially obscured by a stand of cottonwoods. One was Corbin Shaw. The other was a brutish-looking man Jacob recognized as a hired gun who sometimes worked for a ruthless cattle baron over in the next county. Jacob couldn't hear every word, but the wind carried snippets of their conversation. "Don't care about the money anymore," Corbin was saying, his voice carrying a chilling clarity in the pre-dawn stillness. "It's the principle. She made a fool of me. I want her to see. Everything she thought she had turned to ash." "So what's the plan, boss?" the other man asked. "We just take her. We take her," Corbin confirmed. "And then you and the boys are going to have some fun. We'll burn the house, the barn, run off the stock. And as for the farmer, make sure he's inside the barn when the fire is at its highest. I want this place to be a monument to what happens when you cross me." A cold dread, entirely different from his earlier heartbreak, washed over Jacob. This wasn't just about Corbin wanting his money or his partner back. This was about annihilation. This was pure, spiteful evil. He had been right about one thing. Rosalie or Lily had brought danger to his doorstep, but he had been wrong about everything else. Her confession hadn't been a trick to save her own skin. It had been a warning. She was trying to protect him. The woman who was even now preparing to face this monster alone was not the cold-blooded outlaw from her stories. She was the woman who had nursed his arm, who had laughed at Pete's jokes, who had ridden Diablo like she was born in the saddle to save a spooked horse. He had been so consumed by the betrayal of the lie, he had refused to see the truth of the woman herself. His love for her, which he thought had been murdered by her confession, surged back with a fierce protective power. She was his wife, and he would not let her face this alone. He moved with a speed and purpose he hadn't felt in years. He didn't go for his shotgun. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with a simple blast of buckshot. He needed help. He needed the law. He slipped out the back of the house, moving silently through the familiar contours of his land. He saddled Diablo in the darkness of the paddock, the stallion sensing his urgency. He rode hard and low, not towards town, but on a wide, circuitous route through the hills to avoid being seen by Corbin's men. He thundered into Redemption Creek just as the sun was rising, pulling his lathered horse to a halt in front of the sheriff's office. He burst through the door to find Sheriff Brody pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Jacob, what in blazes Brody, there's no time." Jacob panted, his chest heaving. "That man Cole, his real name is Corbin Shaw. He's an outlaw, a killer. My wife, Rosalie, she knew him from before. He's come for her, and he's planning to burn my ranch to the ground with me in it." Sheriff Brody, a calm, methodical man, set down his coffee cup. He looked at the desperation and resolve in Jacob's eyes. "Your wife. How does she know a man like Corbin Shaw?" Jacob met his gaze without flinching. "That's a long story, and it's mine and hers to sort out. All you need to know is that he's here, he has men with him, and he means to kill us. She's riding out to meet him now alone to try and stop him. We have to go. Now." The sheriff didn't ask another question. He saw the conviction in Jacob's face. He grabbed his rifle from the rack and a box of cartridges. "Get your breath, Jacob. I'll deputize a couple of men from the livery. We ride in 5 minutes." As Jacob stood on the porch of the sheriff's office, checking the action on his own Winchester, he looked towards the northern hills, towards the Devil's Anvil. He had sent her away in anger. Now he was riding to bring her back, or die trying. The Devil's Anvil was a desolate cluster of wind-scoured rock, a place that felt older than memory. As Rosalie rode into the clearing at its center, the heavy oilskin pouch of money tied to her saddle, she felt the chilling certainty of being watched. She was walking into a trap, but it was the only move she had left. Corbin Shaw stepped out from behind a spire of rock, his handsome face fixed with a theatrical smile. "Lily, my dear, punctual as always. I trust you have what belongs to me." "The money is here, Corbin," she said, her voice steady. She dismounted, keeping the horse between them. "Take it and go. We're finished." "Oh, I'll take the money," he said, sauntering closer as 2 of his men emerged from the rocks, rifles ready. "But our business is far from finished. Did you really think I'd let you walk away after you humiliated me? You belong to me, Lily." "I belong to no one," she said, her hand inching towards the skinning knife tucked at the small of her back. Corbin laughed, a cold, empty sound. Still the defiant little canary. "It's a shame your farmer isn't here to see this. But don't you worry. My men are on their way to pay him a visit right now. I imagine the smoke from your little love nest should be visible on the horizon any minute." A cold fury eclipsed her fear. The image of her home of Jacob engulfed in flames was too much. "You monster," she hissed. "I'm a businessman," he corrected her smoothly, "and it's time to liquidate my assets." He nodded to his men. "Take her." As they moved forward, a single rifle shot cracked through the air. One of Corbin's men grunted and fell, clutching a hole in his shoulder. "Drop your weapons, Shaw," a voice boomed from the rocks above. It was Sheriff Brody. "You're surrounded." Corbin's smile vanished, replaced by a snarl of pure rage. He drew his Colt Peacemaker with blinding speed, but Rosalie was already in motion. She threw the heavy bag of money at his face, and in the same instant drew the skinning knife. A second shot rang out from a different ridge, and she dove for cover as her horse shrieked and fell. It was Jacob perched on a high ledge, his Winchester laying down, covering fire. The clearing erupted into chaos. Corbin's remaining man fired wildly towards the sheriff, while Corbin, recovering his balance, turned his fury on Rosalie. "You set me up!" he screamed, firing into the body of her fallen horse. Rosalie scrambled for cover, the knife her only defense. The fight was no longer about escape, it was about survival. Jacob's rifle cracked again, and Corbin's man cried out, shot through the hand. As Sheriff Brody and his deputies began descending from the rocks, Corbin knew the game was up. He was cornered, which only made him more dangerous. He saw Jacob on the ridge, the source of his ruin. With a roar, he ignored Rosalie and charged towards the incline, firing his pistol up at his rival. "Jacob!" Rosalie screamed. Jacob tried to chamber another round, but Corbin was moving fast, using the rocks for cover. In that split second, her two lives converged, the cold calculation of Lily Kane and the fierce protective love of Rosalie Miller. She burst from behind her cover and slammed into Corbin as he emerged to take aim. The impact sent them both tumbling to the ground, and his pistol flew from his grasp. He was stronger, but she was quicker. As they wrestled in the dust, he backhanded her across the face, the blow stunning her. He scrambled for his gun. She kicked out her boot, connecting with his wrist, and lunged forward with the knife. He saw the killing intent in her eyes and grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. They were locked in a desperate struggle, his strength slowly turning the blade back towards her throat. "It's over, Corbin," she gasped. "It's over when you're dead," he snarled, forcing the point of the knife closer. A gunshot echoed in the enclosed space, deafeningly loud. Corbin's body went rigid. His eyes widened in surprise, and the strength fled from his arms. He collapsed sideways, the dust puffing up around him, as he looked down at a dark, spreading stain on his chest. Jacob stood 10 feet away, a smoking pistol in his hand, his face pale but resolute. Silence descended, broken only by the whimpering of the wounded outlaw. As Sheriff Brody secured the prisoners, Jacob rushed to Rosalie's side, gently taking the knife from her grasp and helping her to her feet. He touched the bruise already forming on her cheek. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. She shook her head, unable to speak. They stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of her past. The ride back to town was quiet. Sheriff Brody, after a long, thoughtful conversation with Jacob, made his decision. His official report would state that an eastern outlaw, Corbin Shaw, had tracked a woman to Redemption Creek. It would state that Mr. and Mrs. Miller were victims of a violent extortion attempt and had acted in self-defense. The name Lily Kane would not appear in any official record. It was an act of quiet mercy, a recognition that redemption was more than just the name of their town. That evening, back at the blessedly untouched ranch house, they sat at the kitchen table. The wedding band lay between them. "The money," Jacob said quietly. "The sheriff is holding it. He said after the trial, most of it will likely be considered unclaimed." "It's blood money," Rosalie said, her voice hoarse. "I don't want it. Give it to the town, for the church or for families who need it." Jacob nodded. He looked at her, truly seeing the complex, wounded, and fiercely brave woman who had been willing to die for him. "You said you loved me," he said softly. "Was that part of the lie?" Tears filled her eyes, but not of fear or shame. "No, Jacob," she whispered. "That was the only part that was real." He reached across the table and pushed the gold ring towards her. His hand covered hers. "My name is Jacob Miller. I'm a rancher, and I love my wife, Rosalie Miller. The past is just dust. We can build a future, an honest one, together, if you'll have me." Rosalie looked at his strong, calloused hand, covering hers at the wedding band, and at the forgiveness in his eyes that she never thought she deserved. The lies were gone. The secrets were buried with Corbin Shaw. All that was left was a scarred but true foundation, and upon it they would build their home. The story of Jacob and Rosalie Miller became another whispered legend in the Montana Territory, a testament to the fact that in the Wild West nothing was ever as it seemed. People came to the frontier to escape their pasts, to reinvent themselves, and sometimes through trial and fire they succeeded. Their life was never easy. The ghosts of Lily Kane and the deep scars of betrayal would always linger in the quiet moments. But they faced it together, building a love that wasn't born of a hopeful letter, but forged in the harsh realities of truth, danger and forgiveness. What do you think, could a love built on such a devastating lie truly survive? Was Jacob right to forgive her, or was he a fool to trust her again? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found yourself caught up in the dust and drama of redemption, please hit that like button. Share this story with someone who loves a good Western, and be sure to subscribe for more true tales of the unexpected West. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.